Thank you, Sean and Tracy. It's weird being down here in this gym, isn't it? But in a year, we're going to have a beautiful new building that all of you are paying for. Yes, have you all gotten your campaign pledges in? It's going to be 80,000 square feet almost. And we need your help still. Okay, in reading over the call of Matthew, I'm going to reflect this morning for about 30 minutes, and I'll turn it back over to Tracy and Sean. But in reading this over, I was reflecting also on a conversation I had with a lot of my staff members in the office the other day about why some young people are leaving the church. And the reason this relates to Matthew is, Matthew's the tax collector, and he has all these sinners, all his buddies at this dinner, and some of the Pharisees are shocked that Jesus is spending all his time with these lower rate people, in their view. But then Jesus says, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. I have come not to call the self-righteous, the righteous, but sinners. So Jesus does acknowledge that these are sick people, and he is the doctor. And they are maybe lost in various kinds of sinfulness, and he wants to bring them into the way of light and truth and goodness and freedom and joy, and out of whatever darkness they're in. So, in other words, that's what I and we have to do also. People in our day are lost in darkness, and there are people who are sick spiritually as well as physically, and we need to be a healing element for them in their lives as well as we can, because we have shared the same condition, and we need to call them to conversion. And we hesitate to call people to conversion these days because it seems to be that the only thing that's respected in America anymore is that you leave me alone and I leave you alone. Whatever you're into, whatever works for you, and so don't be judging me, right? And so if you're calling me to conversion, that means in their view that you are judging them. You're saying my way of life is sickly, and I don't think it's sickly at all. It's what I want to do, and I'm just doing fine. So get off my case. And sometimes your children will kind of want you to get off their case. But there is sickness, and in a gentle way, we still have to call people to conversion out of darkness into light, because we love them and because their salvation and their happiness is very important to us. So we were having this conversation with some wonderful Catholic parents in the office the other day. Why are some of their adult children leaving the church, not practicing their faith? And so this is going to be interactive. I'm going to throw out a couple of things, and then I'm going to ask you to fill out some of the rest, okay? I remember a few years ago, the Cardinal of Chicago said that in Chicago, a lot of the parishes are half full now. The churches are not full on Sundays. Thank God our church is full on Sundays. If it was half full, I would be depressed. I'm used to it being a Super Bowl every Sunday and people happy to be there. But in Chicago, they were saying, the Cardinal was reflecting on why are the churches half full, as they are maybe in Boston and New York and a few places. And one of the Cardinal's thoughts was that these days, a lot of people in their 20s and 30s are simply not living according to the moral teachings of the church, certainly in sexual ways. They're living a different way, and so they don't want to come to Sunday Mass every week to be reminded or to be, in their view, judged, to be reminded that they may be doing the wrong thing, and then they don't want to hear about that, so they live in avoidance. They're living a certain way of life that is not according to the teachings of the church or the scriptures, so they don't want to be hypocrites and go to Mass or receive Holy Communion when they know they're living in a certain grave way that is sinful. So that was interesting, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. There is a tendency for us, the church, to lose people in their 20s. Of course, I know there aren't a lot of people in their 20s that maybe live in Sugar Land, but look at our masses and see how many you can find in their 20s and early 30s. And then maybe when couples start to get married, to have children, they come back. But I think there's some truth to that. What are some other reasons that maybe people are not practicing their faith? Well, there's a tendency for people to say these days, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. They want you to know they're spiritual, whatever that means, but they're not religious. In other words, I'm not tied into organized religion, and I don't even like organized religion. So I'm going to develop my own spirituality, what works for me. And really, a lot of young people are into that. And so what works, and it's about what works for me. It's rather self-serving, but they create their own morality, their own spirituality, whatever works for them, but they don't want to be held accountable by any body of a church or any moral teachings or any doctrines. They just want to kind of find their own way and do their own thing. Consequently, they're making a lot of mistakes. They're doing the wisdom and the truth of the ages have been there for them, but they didn't want to be accountable to that, and so they're doing their own stuff. Now that's happening a lot today, isn't it? Learnedly people in college, and they don't want to say I have to believe in any of these things. They don't believe in the Eucharist. That's why it's easy for a lot of them to leave and become Baptist or non-doms, as I say, non-doms, or other kinds of churches, Christian groups that don't celebrate the Eucharist because they don't believe in the Eucharist. But they have good singing and maybe some good preaching. And so it's very easy for people to, and of course that's so American, isn't it? It's so American to say, I'm an individual, it's me and God, I'm going to develop my own relationship, usually on my terms, and then, so don't mess with me. Okay, what else? A lot of people just don't have faith today. They don't have faith, and plus we're surrounded by a culture that is faithless, more and more pagan in some ways, and bashes Christianity and certainly the Catholic Church. And they go to colleges where the Catholic Church is bashed and ridiculed. So you almost have to be a very strong person today, a rebel. We are now the rebels. If you want to conform, you conform to all that. But if you want to be a rebel, you've got to make a pretty powerful decision that you're going to stand out in the midst of a people that ridicule you. And I'll mention one more, and then I'll let y'all come up with a couple. I think some people also stop practicing the faith when life gets very tough. We know life is tough, but when it gets tough for us, so let's say something traumatic happens in somebody's life. Someone precious dies or gets very ill, or there's a divorce, or some kind of rejection, and something happens in life, in your business, in your economic life, in your own health. And a lot of people, instead of turning more intensely to God, just say they're deflated, they're discouraged, they're depressed, and they just move away from God, and you never see them again. That happens a lot too. I love what St. Paul said at the end of his life. He said, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I've kept the faith. I've kept the faith. But it's not so easy to keep the faith. Life is difficult, and many people fall away when life gets hard. But we're not in heaven yet. So those were some thoughts. Anything else off the top of your head which you think people maybe fall away from their faith, or, well, of any age, not just 20s and 30-year-olders? Any thoughts? Yes?
I don't know, in the 70s, 80s, it was really a big wall because 80% of the population was Catholic. Right now, we are less than 30% because a lot of people think that because they feel bad about something that the church told them, they want to go and do their own religion. So that has been a big problem for the Catholic faith in Mexico because people are going away from the church to build their own religion when it's something that is not right because that's what they, I don't know, they start. So instead of being one big family, they're like 800 families within, I don't know, one church could be 5 people. And it's like, yeah, but we are the body of Christ.
It's a huge splitting asunder, which is what Jesus prayed against. He prayed so hard in John's Gospel that we continue to be of one mind and one heart, because sin always divides. But we've divided even in Mexico into 1,000 pieces. You're right.
Also, I think that a lot of people don't want to think about these things, and they would rather just go to a movie, see a game, spend their time, especially on Sundays, entertaining themselves, instead of spending the time and going to their own souls and relationship with God.
There's so much to distract us now. We're also busy. You know, we're very busy, but we also have incredible amounts of entertainment and technology, so we can just live in our own virtual world and not have to think about any of these things. That's so true. That is so true. Can't hear you.
People around us, especially in schools and things, have different religions. Plus how they act influences us, which can not even recognize it, but can change how we live our life, which is simply pulling us away from God. So we don't even sometimes realize it from an early age, like in high school, middle school, until we get older, it can change us sometimes.
Yeah, our society now is so diverse, and which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but also it's confusing. And a lot of our young people don't know their faith very well, and so they can get easily confused. Plus, there's a lot of temptations out there too. Our poor kids have to put up with so much that I didn't have to put up when I was young. And you know, I didn't have to deal with pornography when I was young. I feel so sad for our kids. They got everything in their face today, and it's rough. It's rough. Okay, a couple of other ideas? Yes?
I hear nieces and nephews that younger than 20s and 30s, more like teens, frustrated at how much they hear about maybe sexual morality at church and not so much about human trafficking and modern-day slavery and really a lot of cruelty that's going on around the world, and they feel like that's a bigger issue than these, you know, that there's actually people, alive people being hurt.
Yeah.
They hear so much about homosexuality, abortion, sexuality, and not these, you know, not children who are just extreme poverty. And I hear that, I've heard that a lot from younger people as they become aware of these things in our world, not hearing that much of that.
And usually with a lot of these things, it's not either or, it's both and. You know, all of these things are issues, and they're troubling and difficult. But you know what I've found, at least my experience in the last 30 years as a priest is, we went decades without talking about sexuality at all, because we were so intimidated. So pretty much the only talk was about social justice issues in a lot of parishes in the country. and priests just stayed away from sexuality totally. And even today, you don't hear much about this. Certainly not St. Lawrence in the homilies or anything, I don't think. But of course, for some people, if you hear it once, that's too much because they don't want to hear about those things. But yeah, we just got so intimidated by because everybody said, "Oh, church is so hung up on sex and all that," and give us a break. And so for a long time, we didn't even talk about that stuff, and now we need to talk about it all because it's all important. And again, our poor kids, oh gosh. And then they go to colleges. Many colleges are like Animal House today. And at least that's what my nieces tell me. And they went to a very elite Catholic university on the East Coast. Yes. Okay, a couple of other ideas.
This is maybe a little more mundane than practical sexuality, but I think that for a lot of young people today, but certainly in the past and probably in the future, that when they're cradle Catholics, they kind of take our Catholic religion for granted, and so in their college and maybe in their 20s, that's a period where they're discovering themselves, and if you do take your faith for granted, that's a period where it's very easy to fall away because you're distracted by all these other things. And
it is
religion as opposed to their own personal religion.
Yeah.
And I think people come back when they start getting married and having kids, and because they say, well, what are we going to pass on to our children? And so that's a time where they're rediscovering it. But it's sad because without the religion in those very difficult formative years, it is easy to stray. So I think that's one place where
You're right.
lost. And there are Newman centers and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't think they do the best job of pulling in the people who so desperately need that sort of support.
I tell our college students, when you go away to college, please don't take a vacation from your faith. You need Christ and the sacraments more than ever. I mean, college is great, but it's going to challenge you, and you need to be anchored somewhere, or you're going to be all over the map. One more idea? Oh, yes?
Yes, well, I think about diversity. As Pope Francis said, that instead of reject people that are following different paths, learn about them. Learn about what they have to offer to us. Like they were saying, I think a couple of weeks ago, about homosexuals, about divorced people. Like bring them to church instead of reject them. Just learn about them because they are very close to each other. So learn about their qualities.
Well, and the truth is, and Pope Francis has been very good about this, the church, now the media will characterize us or lump us in with more harsh fundamentalists sometimes, but the church does not reject anybody, any of those people, any people. The church is wide open arms. Please come in and follow Christ the best you can. We love you, but when people keep hearing on the media that the church hates you, they make it up. And we just, the church is full of love, but we get characterized and lumped into certain boxes of harsh judgmentalism. Now, we have a teaching from the Christ and the Gospels. We've got to be true to that teaching, but it's a loving teaching, and the Gospel always challenges us to choose the narrow road. That was the Gospel just the other day at Daily Mass, to choose the narrow road to salvation and to life. Well, so what do we do? It's such a challenge out there today. You know, I have 10 nieces and nephews. They're all wonderful people. Of the 10, maybe 3 go to Mass every Sunday. A few of them have married strong Christians who are Baptist or non-denominational, and so they've left their Catholic faith and joined those churches. They go with their spouses now. So they didn't baptize their babies because those places don't believe in infant baptism. So I, as the uncle priest, didn't get to have their weddings or baptize their babies. It's very sad. sad for me, theologically and personally. But what do we do? Of course, no matter what you do, you won't control everything. So you do your best, right? And so please don't blame yourselves. But what do? Do what you're doing now. I think you want to give the greatest treasure you can to your children. Not Vanderbilt necessarily, not the flashiest car on Clemens campus, not some of the things that we try to, not all the vacations and cruises and five-star hotels necessarily, and country club memberships. You got to give them the faith. And so you do that as gently but as perseveringly and clearly as you can. I think for a lot of our people, they don't know the faith. So they have a lot of misconceptions, like the Catholic Church hates gay people. It's a lie. But it's easy to believe that, and if you hear people saying that, that the church hates anybody. So the people, we don't know our faith. And I think if you all can keep delving into your faith, learning the truth, preaching the truth with love and gentleness, and living the freedom and joy of the Holy Spirit, and praying in your home. You know, when I grew up, I did have a docility and a humility that I was so glad the church was my nurturer and teacher. I didn't want to be out there on my own trying to navigate this life as a wanderer on the face of the earth. You know, a lot of parents raise their children today saying, well, we're not going to bring them up in any faith because we want them to make their own decisions. Excuse me. You know how those kids end up? Because I meet them down the road. And that usually meant that the parents themselves had no active faith in anything. And so, because if they did, they'd want to impart this treasure. And so the poor kids grow up having to make their own decision, but they have no base on which to make any decisions, and they're just lost. They're lost. So if you can give them everything you can give them in a loving way, not in a harsh way. I also know some extremely Catholic families where the children have rebelled, and some are going to rebel anyway. But, you know, their parents were maybe so strong that it was part of their rebellion to rebel against everything the parents stood for, and that can happen too. But maybe they still come back and they appreciate their parents one day. But you just give them the treasure of your life as well as you can. And pray. Now, as a little kid, I grew up, we said the rosary every night. Now, prayer is really the key. If you pray, if you find a way as a family to have a family meal and pray the rosary or anything that you can pray together, then the Holy Spirit comes to dwell in your home. The faith seeps deep into their hearts and souls, and there's a love there. And then you raise your children not thinking that the church is a bunch of harsh rules, but you raise your children knowing it's just wild and crazy love. Love of God, love of Jesus, His tremendous love of us, and you'd never want to live outside of that love. And so it's prayer and love and truth, and then do your best, and then you just give them to God after that. Remember, children will always at some point break your hearts. No, forget that. But it does happen. And they break your hearts, but it's temporary, and you come back again, and they break your hearts because you love them so much. They're your life and your love. If you didn't love them so much, your heart would be cold and encased and hard, so they couldn't break it. But that's part of it. And sometimes my family and my parishioners break my heart too. And but you keep loving, and God makes all things work out for the good in the end. So, well, thank you. I just wanted to share some of the thoughts because I had this discussion just the other day with great parishioners who were talking about why their kids have left the Catholic Church, their adult kids. And it breaks their hearts. And it's not just an easy question, but that's what you're here to do, is to try to help counter the culture in which we live, which is destructive. It's very destructive. Do you think that? Oh my gosh. And by the way, last thing, Sean and Tracy, I'm so sorry. I think I'm on time though. The last thing is, because the culture has gotten so dark, and even our young people see that pretty clearly, and it scares them to death. A lot of our young people are scared to death. They won't say that because they can't publicly admit it, but they have a lot of fear inside them for a lot of reasons. But because of this, some of our young people are becoming great saints. It's black and it's not, you can't just live in this gray world and straddle both sides of the fence. And some of our young people are making very strong decisions for Christ and for a way of life. And they inspire me. They're great. And then they become better followers of Jesus than some of us. Oh my. Anyway, rough times call forth great saints. And sometimes they can be 16 years old. But they're still on the journey, but, you know. All right.
We figured you'd rather hear from Father Drew than from us for an hour anyway, right? Right. You have to say right. He's right here. Yes, yes. Give us just a minute because we're going to plug this sound back into the computer.
So I think one of the important things we can take from Father Drew's talk is, we talked earlier about setting the example. And Father Drew said one of the strongest things we can do is pray. And I realized that when we pray together as a family every night before we go to bed, but it's prayer with the kids and it's equivalent to prayer with the kids. My kids don't often see me pray, right, when I do my morning prayers. I'm not with them. So I think it's important that when we run into times of conflict, when we run into times where we really need them, we need to somehow show our children that when we run into those times, we turn to our faith. Because we know that they're going to run into those times as well. And if we haven't been that example for them, they may go elsewhere when all the answers they really need are right here in our faith and in our community and in the people who have lived that love with us and for us. It's kind of nice. We have a Bible study group that we go to, and there's just been a tremendous amount of healing and love that comes forth from that group. And hopefully the kids see that, and they see that as a source of strength and a source of answers, and just as a place to go to and say, can y'all help me? Can y'all pray for me? And I think that is key to setting the example for our children.
And I'm going to admit that I'm one of those people that Father Drew just talked about when he said that their parents basically let their child make their own decisions. I grew up not really going to church with my parents. They said they wanted it to be my decision if I wanted to be baptized. And so this wonderful man right here is a huge reason as to why, not the reason, but just Sean and his family, seeing their example of